so many firsts, I can't name them all. A couple would be the first woman mayor of Austin, first female Texas Railroad Commissioner. And when I asked her, when we were able to visit, a couple of her greatest moments or accomplishments in her professional career, she said that when she was comptroller, she wrote something called The Forgotten Children about
a lot of staff help.
About foster children, and that was something that even today is still very relevant and has made a huge difference. And that another greatest moment was knocking doors to literally raise money to set up Austin Community College. But when I asked her what her greatest accomplishment was, she didn't even hesitate, and it was family and her 4 grown sons. So I am very proud and privileged to present the Honorable Carole Keeton.
Thank you so much, Diane, for that all too kind introduction. And I just want to say to Dr. Sue Heinzelman and Nancy Ewert and Nicole Murphy and Lulu Flores. You know, Lulu is sort of, I take my marching orders from Lulu. But she is an attorney and leader extraordinaire. It's great to be an American, it's great to be a Texan, it's great to be a woman, but I can assure you that it will never get better than being right here in the Julius Glickman Center, and he's a great guy, by the way, the Julius Glickman Conference Center, and with the visionary young women who already have proven their dedication, determination, and demonstrate an undaunted spirit. And you're going to improve the lives and livelihoods and paychecks and jobs and education, health and well-being for all 21st century, but you're going to have a ripple effect not only in this great Lone Star State, but all across these United States and this globe. You know, as Texans, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's the Stephen F. Austin's and the Davy Crockett's and the Susanna Dickinsons and the Elizabeth Nays. But you're our modern-day Texas pioneers who care and who dare, and with special thanks to the exemplary citizens, female and male, and elected officials and staff who are sharing their expertise and their passion for public service with all you bright young women this week. And you come to us from like 16 different fine institutions across this great state and country. I'm honored to be looking right into the faces of the future. It's refreshing and reassuring to know that the future is going to be in very bright hands indeed, and I salute each and every one of you that are participating in this program this evening. You know, your introduction, Diane, is a whole lot better than that fellow in East Texas who's introduced me rather quickly, and instead of introducing me as having been the first woman mayor of Austin, he introduced me as having been the first mayor of Austin. And I was in the back of the room, and being a mother of 4 sons, you know, I'm not too quiet. I sit in the back of the room, and I said, that was 1839. This fellow sitting next to me said, hey, you look really good. I said everything is relative. When I was first elected mayor of Austin, I was the youngest woman mayor of a major city in these United States. There were only like 3 women mayors of major cities at that time. The other 2 were about my age now. They sort of mothered me along the scene. And then, of course, my last few terms in statewide elected office, I ran as one tough grandma. So you know that spanned about 3 decades of public service. But my greatest accomplishment, bar none, you mentioned it, are my 4 grown sons. And my greatest joy are my 8 grandchildren. And I just, you know, have to start out talking about them, and then we'll get on to everything else. But my grandchildren, I said I had 4 boys in 4 years, had twins in the middle. And their names are Mark, Brad, Dudley, and Scott McClellan. This is the last name of all my kids. And I spent a lot of years single parenting. But I had 6 granddaughters in a row right after, you know, when I started having grandchildren. The eldest now is 18. Catherine Cat McClellan is going to UT next year in electrical engineering. I can't do her advanced calculus right now. So she was 4 weeks old, sleeping on my shoulder when I was sworn in as railroad commissioner. It's hard to believe that she is graduating from Austin High this next week. And her little sister, who's 5'9", we'll see what she does next year. But when they bend over to kiss me, I tell them that's when I feel old. They said, don't feel old, just feel short. Then I have twin granddaughters that are 14 years old in D.C. Mark, my eldest, it's not the twins that have twins. I've got twin granddaughters in D.C. that are 14. And Mark is my son, my middle 2 sons, my twins are both lawyers here in Austin. Mark, my eldest, is the doctor and the economist. and he was FDA commissioner. He's now heading up the Center for Healthcare Reform at Brookings, but he's got the twin girls that are 14, and they're going into the 10th grade in the District of Columbia. And then I've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old granddaughter here. Whoops, they just turned 9 and 7. They just turned 9 and 7, 7-year-old Sunday. That are here in Austin. That's the other twin. That's Dudley. He didn't get married for a while. That has the younger granddaughters. And then I'm a bi-coastal grandma now. My youngest son, Scott, who was press secretary, is now vice president of communications for Seattle University. I have a 4-year-old grandson that they named Keeton. I'll get back to that in a minute. And he has a new little brother. I went to Seattle to help that little brother come to the world, who is 3 months old. Okay, so, you know, I figured when that youngest is 20, I'm going to be 93. So that's my motivator. That's my motivator for staying in shape. My grandmothers lived healthily into their 90s. That sort of makes my foes shudder when they hear that. But anyway, I'm racking up a lot of frequent flyer miles on Southwest and Alaska Airlines. But my kids always get amused when they hear the One Tough Grandma tagline, because my son Brad, who actually dropped me off here this evening, Brad said, whenever he hears someone calling One Tough Grandma, he said, she's one soft touch grandma, but she was one tough mama. Well, after living in early boys' locker room decor, you know, the boys always say I'd earned those 6 granddaughters in a row, and I was single parenting during those years. But you know, my bottom line on it is the good Lord has a sense of humor, and I earned it after the early boys' locker room decor. I made the decision years ago, though, that my sons would learn as much from what I was involved with as if I were sitting inside the home holding them on my lap all day long. That they'd learn as much or more with what I was involved with. And so they learned to lick stamps and stuff envelopes at early age. That was before the days of computer. And I can remember one particular time when I was first time I was running for mayor, and a woman never run for mayor in Austin before, and I had 8 male opponents. Am I walking out of range with your I had 8 male opponents, and tough runoff, and in the runoff, a lot of fun things happened. But anyway, in the runoff, we knew it was a pretty April sunny day, and people weren't voting, and I knew that, you know, that in some of our good precincts, people weren't getting out to vote. So we got on a sound truck, and that hadn't been seen in a lot of parts of Austin before. We got on a sound truck, the old sound truck with speakers on top, you know, and going up and down the streets of where I had good support, and just reminding people to go out and vote. It was late afternoon, we had phone banks going in there, and we were trying to get people out. And so my youngest, Scott, was with me, and he was very young at that age, and interesting people were with me that day. Martha Smile, I can't remember who all, but anyhow, and we were taking turns on the speaker, and by that time I was kind of, you know, so when I got where I just couldn't talk, I handed the speaker to Scott, and Scott got on the mic, and people were out in the yards working. He'd say, "Please go vote for my mother." That was before he was spokesperson for the free world, you know. Anyway, people did exactly what you did. I mean, they're out in the yard, they'd turn around and laugh, dropped their rakes, picked up their shoes. You'd see them going in the house. We had the closest mayoral election in history. I still credit him probably with making that margin of difference. The second time I had the widest margin in history for this, that first time you remember. Well, I love it when the beat goes on. I was in D.C. this is when Mark was FDA commissioner, but his little girls were actually born in California. He was at Palo Alto, but at Stanford. But he was FDA commissioner. They were in D.C. and I was visiting them, and the girls had their dolls in a circle. They were 5 years old. Ellie and Alex were 5 years old. Their names are Elizabeth, Carole, and Alexander Sarah. They were named after the grandmothers. Mark always said, "Hey, boy, did we ever name them right, Mom?" Because Elizabeth Carole, the one named after me, you know, always in timeout. I used to call and say, "Let her out." But Ellie and Alex had their dolls in a circle on the floor, and I just happened to be walking through, and their mom walked through and said, "Ellie, Alex, are your dolls having a picnic?" And Ellie looked up and said, "No, Mom, they're having a town hall meeting." I guarantee you, I have found every occasion to share the well-behaved women rarely make history bumper stickers with all of my grandchildren, and granddaughters particularly. I was blessed with being born into a family that thrived on people and problem solving and being where the action is. And my mom and dad, Madge and Paige Keeton, were and are my true life heroes. I've lost them both some years ago, but they are my heroes. My dad grew up picking cotton in Red River County. They were dirt poor farmers. He grew up picking cotton from the time he was a little boy, and he had 3 younger brothers, so he was in charge of his little brothers picking the cotton too. And he said it's when he grew up picking cotton, he decided he was going to have a sit-down job the rest of his life. He actually came here to the University of Texas when he was 15, almost 16 years old, put himself and his little brothers through school here, and went on to be Dean of the Law School at the University of Texas, and the law school now sits on Dean Keeton Street. I don't know if you know from out of town. Of course, I always make a point of coming Dean Keeton Street anytime I come this way, and he knew that before he died. That happened before he died. But I got my law by osmosis, not by degree. I have one older brother who is a lawyer. I'm not. I got my law by osmosis, not by degree. But when we were 2, 3, and 4 years old, Dad would give us bedtime cases instead of bedtime stories. And we said our prayers at night, and he always said, "Okay, Carole, you're the judge. What would you do?" He never distinguished between myself and my brother, and I think that's where I learned that, well, there is no ceiling for women, you know. By the way, my dad taught the law. My mom was the law. She'd actually met Dad in his torts laws class. I imagine that's quite scandalous. But anyhow, but we learned on the home front that it's not the dollars you make, it's the difference you make. And that's what I've drilled into my kids and grandkids. It's not the dollars you make, it's the difference you make. And what a difference each and every one of you already are making. You wouldn't be here if you weren't already making a difference. I know how highly qualified all of you are, and what a difference you're going to make with your new leadership in this 21st century. And I think that the other thing, that's good advice and counsel, and the other thing that Dad always told me from a very early age, and I never forget it, he said, "Carole, if you don't have somebody mad at you, you probably haven't done anything." It's okay to have somebody mad at you if you're speaking up in those causes of human well-being and human decency, and you can't just speak up and speak out, but you've got to provide solutions to make the situation better. But sometimes people believe that those who point out the problems are the problems. That's not the case. The problems are the problems, or I'd rather say the challenges. And the challenges that this state faces are incredible. Not insurmountable, they're incredible. And we've got to look for common ground, embrace one another, and agree that the divides of yesterday must not cloud our judgment and our resolve to make tomorrow better. And we have got to leave partisan politics, have got to end at election time, and we've got to proceed with bipartisan cooperation and statesmanlike governing. As Texans, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we know that our future is based on that same pioneer spirit of determination, independence, integrity, Texas grit, determination. And from your experiences right here at New Leadership Texas, you're never going to be content to sit on the sidelines. You aren't now, or you wouldn't be here. To sit on the sidelines, you're going to be a part of the pulse beat of your community and your state and your nation and this globe. And you're going to play an integral part in decision making and problem solving. You are the new leadership for this century, and you will be the decision makers. You have a special responsibility to speak up and speak out and demand accountability at all levels of government for all public actions taken or not taken. And again, leadership means you've got to offer solutions. You've got to be actively involved to improve the situation. I think the greatest lies are often told in silence. And it's a silence that's construed as consent. Speak up, speak out, tell it like it is, speak the truth. Don't be afraid to have somebody mad at you. It's okay to make waves and make trouble when you're doing it for good reasons. I always kind of liked Englishman Edmund Burke when I was a government major. Of course, that was in Edmund Burke of the 1800s. I'm not quite that old, close. But I always read about Englishman Edmund Burke, and I liked his decision-making pattern. What he did was, he said he'd gather all the facts. You know, he'd list together all the facts and anything that staff and everybody else would give you. And then he'd listen to the people, those who agreed with him and those who disagreed with him. But then, vote and act your conscience. And by the way, the Englishman Edmund Burke was not reelected to Parliament. But I still like the way he did decision making, acting and voting your conscience. It's people, not events, that shape history. I think trends give us a glimpse of the future, but it's up to us to make that future bright. So you've got to roll up your sleeves and go to work, because that bright future is not going to happen accidentally. And I really believe that women and men have got to speak up and speak out on the issues of the day. And I frankly believe there's no such thing as women's issues or men's issues. I believe that men as well as women are concerned about schools and families and communities and economics and environment and paychecks and jobs and affordable, accessible health care, and a strong national defense. But I do believe that women have a special determination, creativity, caring, toughness, determination, and passion. And women must not abdicate their responsibility to lead and to lift all of our children and all of our people. And that's what I think women are so very specially prepared for. Women are also known for having a great sense of humor. And it's my strong belief that whether it's in the political arena or professional arena or the civic arena, wherever you are, you've got to keep a sense of humor. Cisco's story is one of my favorite. That first time when I was running for mayor, Cisco's, I don't know if you've ever been to Cisco's on 6th Street. Cisco's is great. You know, it's changed ownership now, but Rudy Cisneros, back when I was running for mayor 100 years ago, Rudy Cisneros owned Cisco's Bakery, and it was the male politician gathering place. They'd go there for breakfast every morning. And, you know, frankly, I was home packing school lunches, running kids and all before I went to work in the morning. I had never been to Cisco's for breakfast. But Rudy Cisneros and Joe Maynor owned Hilton Maynor Funeral Home here. He'd been president of the Chamber of Commerce, very prominent man. I didn't know him either. Nice guy, but I didn't know these guys. And Joe Maynor with Hilton Maynor Funeral Home, who'd been president of the Chamber of Commerce, and Rudy Cisneros, who owned Cisco's Bakery, which was the male politician gathering place. And my opponent, they say never say your opponent's name, so I still don't. But this is when I kicked into a runoff with one person, when I had those 8 guys I was running against. 2 days before a very tough runoff election, they held a news conference, and their bottom line was, this job is just too tough for a woman. And they quoted Rudy Cisneros with Cisco's Bakery, Joe Maynor with Hilton Maynor Funeral Home, and my opponent. And the headlines on the Austin American Statesperson, that's really not the title, but on the Austin American Statesperson, the day before the runoff election, banner headlines. This bit was, job too tough for a woman. And it went on to quote, I'd been president of the school board at that time. Anyway, they went on to quote Rudy Cisneros with Cisco's Bakery and Joe Maynor with Hilton Maynor Funeral Home and my opponent. Well, with hours and hours after those hit the curb in the morning, I had a delegation of women arrive at my back door. I think Jane Hickey, there were all sorts of women there. Claire Coyle, all were at my back door, and they had T-shirts already printed up. And the T-shirts said, because we kind of run that campaign out in my kitchen way, the T-shirt said, women, eat at Cisco's, be buried at Hilton Maynor. That was the day before the election. I want you to know by election day, those T-shirts were everywhere. And I am convinced that Rudy Cisneros helped make the margin difference in that election, along with Scott saying vote for my mother. But I want you to know that after I won that very close election, that was on a Saturday night, the next Monday, not at breakfast hour, because I was still packing school lunches to take the kids to school, but at the noon hour, I gathered up all my volunteers. My kids were all in school and kindergarten anyway. Gathered up all my volunteers, and I said, we're going to Cisco. You know, so we all met at Cisco's, and we did take one young cub reporter along with us. Arnold Garcia, who is now editor of the Austin American Statesman, was covering me in the school board back in those days. He'd announced that I was going to run for mayor. I announced like 6 weeks out. Anyway, I called up Arnold. I said, Arnold, you want to go have lunch with us? We're going to Cisco. Oh, yeah. And so Arnold, and so we arrived at Cisco's, and I was kind of leading this whole group of women. I don't think poor Rudy even saw Arnold in that group, but anyhow. And I walked in Cisco's. I'd never been in Cisco's. And I saw who had to be Rudy back at the cash register, and I just went right over there to him. And I said, hi. I said, hey, I think he thought we were coming to demonstrate. I said, hey, we just came to enjoy your food and have a good time. Well, I want you to know that at the end of that day, I got one mailgram that said, I didn't say it, Rudy didn't sign Joe. And I got another mailgram that said, I didn't say it, Joe didn't sign Rudy. And the day I was sworn into office, I had this white ruffled pillow with the caricature of Rudy Cisneros on it, said stuff with crow feathers. And he became my greatest supporter from that day forward. I actually gave one of the eulogies at his funeral some years ago, but we were dear friends. So, you know, keep a sense of humor and don't let anything get in your way, you know, just go right back at it. But speaking of humor, and then I'll get on to other things too, but Irma Bombeck came through Austin when my third term as mayor. And for all of you, and all of you are under 50, you know. Anyway, meet me after, and I'll tell you who Irma Bombeck is. Great humorist author, you know. But she came through Texas pushing her book on motherhood, the second oldest profession. Said no one wanted to hear about agriculture anyway. So Liz Carpenter invited me out to Lady Bird's Ranch to meet Irma Bombeck. And I'll never forget what Irma Bombeck told us that day. She said, you know, I started speaking up and speaking out on issues at that awkward age. She said that's when you're too old for a paper route, too young for Social Security, too healthy for home, and too tired from the fair. Well, you know, you all are too young to be at that awkward age, and I'm too old to be at that awkward age. But anyway, but the whole point, the whole issue is you're never too old. You know, speak up, speak out on issues. You're never too young, never too old. And by the way, my mother, if she were sitting here, she would be saying, slow down, Carole, I can't listen as fast as you talk. You know, my kids always say I speak 365 words a minute, gets up to 400 miles an hour. But the reason I talk this fast, and I'd tell people this cross state, and then my mom really would shake her head. When I was a kid, my mom would let me help her in the kitchen. She'd let me lick the beaters on the electric mixer, but she wouldn't turn them off. You're going to shift gears many times in your life. Sometimes because you want to, many times because you must shift gears. And my advice to you is, my bottom line is, don't wait for an engraved invitation or to open an Evite, because it's not going to come. You know, just do it. That's what my kids used to tell me, Mom, just do it, just do it. One of my daughter-in-laws told me recently, said, you know, you reinvent yourself every so many years. I thought, well, maybe so, I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing, whenever I'm reinventing myself, it's still, at every passage of my life, it's full force, speak up, speak out, and get actively involved to improve the situation. And you don't have to be Superwoman to make a difference. I think the Superwoman image is as offensive as the airbrush bunny in the Playboy centerfold. It's not reality. You know, many days the beds aren't made, or you know, you drop a stitch. Well, I don't, because I don't sew like my grandmothers did. But anyway, but you know, things don't always go smoothly, and that's okay. Sometimes it's 2 steps back, and then you take a big leap forward. That's all right. You don't have to be Superwoman to make a difference, and as long as you're going at it, I always like to paraphrase words of Lincoln, who said, "If when I come to lay down my reins of power, if I shall have but one person left, it shall be that one inside me." My bottom line translation of that, in a not too ladylike phrase: do in your gut, you know what's right. You don't take a show of hands. You don't poll. You don't need to waste time and money polling your constituents to see where they are on the issues. You've got to do in your gut, you know what's right, because you've got more information than anybody else about what's going on that issue. And there are many things I've done in my life. I thought, well, that's it. That's fatal. I'll never have to put a career after this. I learned a lot more from a couple elections I lost than from all the elections that I won. Never believe your own news releases. Never forget from whence you come. You come from the people. And you're there to serve all of the people. Those who voted for you, those who didn't vote for you, and those who are the most vulnerable in all and may not have ever been able to vote at all. And whatever your chosen professions, remember that you can and you will shift gears many times in your life. I started out as a public school teacher and then never forgot my roots. Between local and statewide office, I owned my own business in the private sector for a while, bringing small businesses to town. I always think you ought to have to live under the laws that you pass. It's good to go from the public sector back to the private sector and back again. I'm convinced you all will become candidates. No matter what else you do, you can become a candidate too. You can do politics with whatever else you're doing in your lives. And women can help women even if they don't want to be a candidate. I had one of the best things that helped me when I was single parenting was I had a group of women who said, you know, I'm not into the politics stuff, but they did, for a better way to call it, Meals on Wheels for my kids at home. It was great. You know, when I was running that third term for mayor and all, they prepared 3-course meals and delivered them to home, and you know, that was great. I didn't have to shop, didn't have to cook, didn't have to clean up. Of course, I had to taper the kids off those 3-course meals after the campaign was over. It's back to holiday house number 6 or holiday house number 7. No, they're not holiday house. Hamburgers aren't here anymore. Anyway, I operate, by the way, out of the I Hate to Cook cookbook. My mom gave me a paperback copy of that decades ago. There's a chapter in there called Dinner Will Be Ready in 5 minutes as soon as I decide what we're having, and that was before the days of microwave. Politics is people and problem solving and being where the action is. And it's a good profession. And I was blessed to be brought up in those dinner table discussions of people and problem solving and being where the action is. And that's what I've carried on with my kids and my grandkids. Bring friends, bring whoever on Sunday nights, doesn't matter, don't need to know ahead of time when we have people and politics and where the action is. But I believe that, and what I would never have been comptroller of the state of Texas if I hadn't been laminating chairman of Cassis Elementary PTA, and the school board cut off our funds. And back in those days, you didn't laminate with machines. You cut it out, ironed it on, and I'd been a teacher. I knew how important those laminating materials were for particularly the kindergarten and elementary years and all. And the school board cut off the funds, and I thought, well, I'm going to go to a school board meeting and see why they cut off our funds. And so I packed up my poor little boys, and I didn't have a sitter, so I took them with me to a school board meeting. They did not have a citizen communication part of the agenda, and so I waited through the long evening, and that night I met two people from East Austin who I'd not known before, Larry Jackson and Velma Roberts. Velma Roberts is now deceased. Larry Jackson is still a good East Austin activist. And they were there, and I got to visiting with them because we were both there. They didn't have some. They said you can stay till the meeting's over. If they want to listen to you, then they will. I thought, well, golly, I'll stay and they'll know we're here if I have those four little boys with me. But I started talking to Velma and Larry, and I said, what are y'all here for? And they said, well, we're here. We want to start a pilot breakfast program in one of our East Austin schools. And they said, because you had free lunch program, but you didn't have any breakfast program back then. They said, we want to do a pilot program and show them that, you know, if these kids can eat in the morning, how much better they're going to be performing during the day. We're going to do it for nothing. We're going to do it. I said, oh man, that's a no-brainer. That's great. And so when we got the meeting in this, I said, hey, you go before me. What you've got is far more important than me, you know, asking for restoring, laminating. So, well, they stood up there and talked to the school board. The ones sat there and waited. They talked to the school board about how they want to set up a pilot breakfast program. And one of the school board members just absolutely grilled them about, well, are you going to pick up the depreciation on the pots and the pans that you use for the breakfast program? And I sat in the back, I was horrified. I sat in the back room and I thought, I can't believe that. And I'm getting ready to ask them to restore funding for laminating. It was at that moment, sitting in the back room, I thought, I'm going to run for a school board, and that's who I'm going to run against. And that's what I did. That's what I did the next year. That's exactly what I did. So I never would have been comptroller with the state of Texas. I ran for the Railroad Commission because of the cost of blue jeans. You could ship blue jeans cheaper from Taiwan to Austin than you could truck them from El Paso to Austin because of regulated trucking in this state. And everybody said, oh, you never get elected to the Railroad Commission if you're for trucking deregulation. Well, we were losing paychecks and jobs. It was costing us. Well, I did get elected. But anyhow, it's no great plan out there. It's just things that really, you know, catch your attention and have you do it. But I think mamas and grandmamas obviously have a special commitment for nurturing the well-being of our most vulnerable citizens, and that's our young citizens. Let me mention to you something very quickly. You may have seen all over the news this week that now, compare 2000 to 2011, Pew just did a research study. And women in households with children under 18, in the year 2000, 11% were the primary breadwinner were women, 11% in 2000. In 2011, 40% of the #1 breadwinner in the households with children under 18 are women. Now, of that, 37% are the primary breadwinner. 63% are the sole breadwinner. They're single moms. And yet, and that tells you how far we've come, not only in the workforce, and of course we've been closing the gap in education, we've been closing the gap in workforce, but not in salaries. They still were saying, you know, it's 81 cents, and that's probably a good figure, 81 cents. You can find every kind of range in there of what it actually is. And it's even tougher from minority women. And I have a special fondness for single parents and what they're doing. So we've got a lot to do. We've got to close that gap, that wage gap. And it's tougher, and you'd think with college degrees it'd be better, but not necessarily so. The same thing with the college degrees. In fact, in some cases, it's worse. So my vision for Texas is high-paying, high-skilled jobs for all Texans. And limited government, unlimited opportunity, but nothing is more important than education. And it is a sham to preach excellence and deliver mediocrity, and that's what we've been doing in this state. Our state's future tax base and our fiscal well-being depend directly on a highly educated workforce. We've got to put Texans first, not the special interests first. It means great schools for our children, real security for our families, and a responsible government for our citizens. Our Texas economy continues to outpace the U.S. economy. We've been growing. Last year it was like 3.2%. The U.S. economy was 2.2%. The first part of this quarter this year it's 2.4%. If you compare our gross state product, the total value of goods and services in this state, to other nations' gross national product, I'm not talking about other states, other nations' gross national product, it changes. I can tell you as comptroller, I watch those economic indicators, but it changes rapidly. But right now we would have the 12th largest economy in the world here in the state of Texas. Well, and it's almost number 10. And that has been 7, it goes up and down. Texas is great, but we can do better. And when I say Texas is great, we can do better, this state is abdicating its responsibilities in education and health care, and ignoring state challenges is creating local crises. We're number 12 in the world compared to other countries, not just these United States with our economy yet. Texas is 34th in the nation in teacher salaries in 2012, 44th in the nation in terms of per pupil expenditures, revenues in 2012, 36th in the nation in terms of the percentage of K through 12 revenue coming from the state. Texas picks up only 41%. I'll get back to that in just a second. We're dead last in these United States in the percentage of Texans 25 years or older with a high school diploma or the equivalent. And we're dead last in the percentage of Texans covered by any type of health insurance, and it just is unconscionable that we're dead last with children's health insurance. We need more dollars for education. We need more of every education dollar going directly into the classroom with the teacher and student where it belongs. And by any definition, even TEAs, and they've broadened the definition of what I call going into the classroom, they're saying that only 55 cents out of every dollar is going into the classroom. I say it's probably closer to 50 cents. But I've read study after study, and I have yet to find the first study that says that all the levels of central administration make a difference for that child in the classroom. It's the teacher. And our Texas teachers are underpaid and underappreciated, and it's costing us billions of dollars every year in dropouts and retraining and what have you. I had a plan that I called Texas Next Step. Got killed on the House floor, very frankly, because the governor himself directly intervened. Got killed on the House floor. I called it Texas Next Step because I knew it wasn't the last step. But I wanted every Texas high school graduate, once they get that diploma in their hand, to be able to go on to 2 years of a public community college or a technical college or a 2-year college designated by the legislature, and have the state pick up the tab for tuition, fees, and books. In other words, I wanted to make K through 14 the norm in this state, because now it's K through 16 and beyond. And every time I'd identify the dollars for it, in fact, back at the last time when I was identifying, we had a $150 billion budget, and for $150 million out of that $150 billion budget, we could have done that. You back out other grants, you know, community college, you get a great bang for your buck, and I said, you know, well, let me tell you why it caught my attention. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics said that by the year 2030, 60% of Texans are only going to have a high school diploma or less. Well, I say hogwash to that, and that was my solution. You can't just pick out one child in the family. They all need to be going. It was when I was sitting in a colonius in South Texas with a mama and a grandmama that I started thinking about this. But my bottom line is I'd rather spend $2,500 a year educating that young Texan than $16,000 a year incarcerating that young Texan. And there's a direct connect. And if someone's in community college for 6 months, they're never going to be on welfare. Well, I'd always identify the dollars, and they'd use it for other things, and that has not happened. Massachusetts adopted. I was at Zavala Elementary in East Austin reading some little kindergarten kids a few years ago, and I was telling them, what are you going to be in the year 2030? You know, I was working off that stat, and they were saying, you know, teachers and astronauts and basketball players and all these healthcare people and all these doctors and great things. And I said, and how old are you going to be in the year 2030? And, you know, they were bright little kids, depending on their age. They say 25, 26, they were, you know, adding their math correctly. And without thinking, I said, and how old will I be in the year 2030? And this little kid said, you'll be dead. Principal was gasping for breath. I was just most amused. I said, you know, you're probably right. But if I said, you're probably right. And I said, and if I am, I said, but if I'm not, I'm going to need good health care providers, so study hard. And if I am, You tell the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics they were wrong. So you all are going to tell the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics when it's 2030 they're wrong, because we're going to bust that. We're not going to listen to those stats. We're going to change their trend. Texas is great, but we can do better. And I had a reporter by the name of Gary Shar, who used to be an AP reporter. Then he was on Capitol Bureau with both the San Antonio Express News and Houston Chronicle, and newspapers having to combine forces these days. He is now just not doing that anymore. But he called me in 2011 legislative session, the last legislative session, right before this one. And he said, Carole, and I can pick and choose who I want to call back these days, but he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Always quotes you right. I called him back and I said, Gary, because a lot of times I don't like Monday morning quarterback. He said, Comptroller, do you remember what you said to the governor on May the 5th of 2006? He said, I was laughing. This was 2011 when he was calling me in this special legislation that spring. I said, no, Gary, but I can remember what was happening on May the 5th of 2000. I said, do you happen to have that quote right in front of you? He said, yes, I do. He said, will you read it to me? He said, yes. He said, here's what you said. You said, and I quote, Governor, you're asking the legislature to write the largest hot check in Texas history. The margins taxes was the franchise tax, quote, isn't going to work. Furthermore, 5 years from now, we're going to be $23 billion short on the revenue you say it's going to bring in. You know, the idea was this margins tax, the franchise tax, was to flip. The state was picking up the state was only picking up 40%, local districts were picking up 60%. This was to flip it, where the state would pick up 60% of educating our elementary and secondary students, and the state would pick up 60%, and the local districts would pick up 40%. This was supposed to flip it. It didn't work. I had great staff, really great staff. So, I had great staff, and I said, it's not going to work. My economists run all the numbers. I threw myself in front of it, trying to stop it, because I said, we're going to be 23. Well, Gary said, okay, it is May the 5th, 2011. And guess what? $23 billion short. Oh, he said, you know what the governor said back to you? I said, no, but I can remember it generally. He said, quote, she's lying, it's going to bring in twice that revenue. He said, doesn't it make you feel good that you're right on target? It's 5 years later, you're on target. I said, no, it makes me feel awful, because it's education, education, education. Right now, even TEA says the state's only picking up 41%. And I question whether it's even that much. So those challenges are still out there for you all to solve. I'll mention just one thing about children's health insurance. We can insure a child for $110 a month, and you get $2 to $3 matching funds on that. We have millions of dollars going to other states because we're not insuring those children. It's just unconscionable. And these are not welfare recipients. These are working poor. They are hard-working Texans. And so what happens is, when you don't insure that child, they don't disappear. They're going to not have the preventative care. They're going to get sick, so that child is going to go into the emergency room, and when that child steps into the emergency room, it's going to cost an average of $6,700 for one visit to the emergency room. Even if you don't care for all the reasons you ought to care on, if you're a true conservative, then the best use of your dollars is to insure that kid. But you ought to care for all those reasons. You ought to care. But it's just unconscionable. And that's why I say Texas is great, but we can do better. And I know who's going to lead the charge on the doing better, because I'm looking right into the faces of the future leaders who are going to see that this state does better. I believe in what I used to call my Yellow Pages test, now I call it the Google test. I said, government should do no job if there's a business you can Google that can do that job better and at a lower cost. But where we've made the decisions to help Texans and to help all children, not only take that first step on starting school, but take that, maybe we have 5 million school children, but take that next step on to college. We've got to do the best job that our tax dollars and common sense will allow. And no state can be great if we cast aside any of our members. And so for Texas government, the message of the 21st century is crystal clear. If the promise of the future is going to be built on the success of our children, we must do everything in our power to ensure that success. And the future I want for my granddaughters, Catherine, Michelle, and Ellie, and Alex, and Anna, and Audrey, and my grandsons, Keeton and Kate, Mom and Dad would love it, Keaton's name Keaton, is the future I want for all Texas children and grandchildren. used to have that down. My Spanish is not very good, but I said, el futuro que quiero para mis nietos es el mismo futuro que quiero para todos los niños y niñas y nietos y nietas de Texas. I keep trying. Texas belongs to no special interest group, no special political credo, no special individual. It belongs to all Texans. And our government has got to reflect the people of Texas. Strong, proud, courageous, caring. And to guarantee prosperity for Texans, we've got to lift all Texans. And that's the Texas that I want my children and my grandchildren and all of our children, all of our grandchildren to inherit. And that's the future I think we're committed to creating. And I guarantee you I'll keep going with every last breath I have. But I'm challenging you all to lead the charge. You are the future. You are the ones who will lead the charge. It's a burning platform. You know, I think it's the moment for you to seize this century and make it all of ours. And that's going to require your vision, your commitment, your new leadership. And I believe to have that new leadership, we must have strong bipartisan leadership. We need strong people running in both parties and multi-parties. That's fine too, but you've got to have bipartisanship. Politics has got to stop when the election is over, and the governing has got to begin with great bipartisan representation. And we've got to represent the people's interests, not the special interests. In those years I spent, I was always going to write a book about people in politics and parenting and pushing on the peanut butter. And I never got very far in my book, but I did have my title, and this was years ago, you have to understand, and my mother heard me say this once and speak, said, oh, no. I said, I haven't gotten very far in the book, but that's when I had those, four boys that were teenagers. That's why I said, my title of my book was going to be Jock Straps on the Dining Table. You're so thankful when you walk in and they're not. I mean, that's where you fold clothes, or, right? I mean, whatever. My mother was just horrified when she heard me say that. You can never name a book that. Well, I've still not had time to write that book. Believe it or not, I'm still kind of working on a book right now. But kind of my own version of my mom back while you do things. But I have to tell you that my granddaughter Anna, she's the one who's just turned 9. She's got the quietest parents of all. Dudley, my daughter, but those genes went right to her, And she was 2. She'd say hello to someone walking down the street, work the tables at restaurants. But Anna was sitting on my lap when she was 3 years old, and Mom and Dad did not get to live to see Anna, but she was sitting on my lap when she was 3 years old, and one of my older granddaughters, Michelle, was singing out at Riverbend. She had a solo at Christmas time, and so we all went through, here, Michelle, and we were sitting on about the first 3 pews or rows because my son Brad saved some seats for us, and I had these were her little cousins, but Michelle was, she was 10 or 11 or so, but she was singing a solo, and Anna was sitting on my lap at 3, and her mom was sitting next to me. She had a little sister that was, she was doing a ball too. So I held Anna, and Anna saw Michelle walk out onto the stage, getting ready to sing her song. And Shell, she doesn't have an indoor voice. It's outdoor. Don't know where she gets that. Anyway, she said, Shell, I want you to show me. And she was talking about things like she was talking to her. And I could see Michelle was getting tickled. And her mother, who was sitting right next to me, Anna's mother said, shh, and said, shh. She shooshed her about 2 or 3 times. And Anna sat up in her very not inside voice and said, I will not be shooshed. And I was high-fiving it, Of course, my son, and of course, the 3 rows of parishioners around her were hitting the floor because they knew whose lap she was sitting on. And my son said, oh, Mom, thanks a lot. And afterwards, I was walking out of there, and I said, right, Anna, don't let anybody, shoosh you. I was trying to make times when you can and can't, but anyway. So I thought, well, maybe that's a better name for the book. I will not be shooshed. Never ever be shooshed. But thank you very much for having me. I'll be glad. I don't know if we have time. If you want to do any Q&A, I'd be delighted to answer some questions and answers, or I'd be delighted to listen to you educate me. I had such fun visiting with some of you beforehand, and I'm going to stick around to visit after too. And I hope, listen, I'll give you my email, everything else. I hope y'all will stay in touch with me, and I really mean that. I want you to know that I'll never forget being able to meet you and see you as you're kicking into gear here. And again, you'll shift gears many times in your life, but I want you to know that you have refreshed and reassured me, and I can assure you that I'm going to continue to be one tough grandma, watching out for education, watching out for health care, watching out for paychecks and jobs, watching out for our most precious resource and our most vulnerable resource, and that's our children, our forgotten foster children, and watching out for Texas. And I'm going to be applauding full force the new leadership that you're going to be demonstrating all across this Lone Star State and this globe. Thank you so much, and Godspeed. Educate me or ask me questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I've been taking notes so that I can entertain my class with some of these jokes, which
I tell too many
will
stories.
be totally incongruent with my own life. But, we do have time, I think, for some questions from the audience, if there are questions. We also have a wonderful reception outside, and we can continue the conversation there.
And if you have a question, tell me who you are. I met a lot of you beforehand, but tell me who you are. Again, so everybody knows who you are. Don't be shy. I know this group is not shy. Yes, ma'am.
I've been telling you before. I'm so glad you're here. You're really inspiring. And it just makes me want to go, run for office now. And I feel like, right now it seems like it's, oh man, they're at a time in their life that they could do that. But what can we do right now as young people? What can we do to
Anything. Anything. You could and see what you're. Is that sometimes you want to. I remember when I ran for the school board. I said nobody runs for the school board. I remember Robert Sneed. Did you ever know Robert Sneed? He was great. You're too young. You don't know all too young. He was a Democrat Party chairman. He said, "Oh, run for the legislature." I said, "Look at these little kids. I can't spend a year running." But pick out their school boards. There's that's nonpartisan races in Texas, which I love. I wish more were nonpartisan races. A lot of states you run partisan for your local offices, but in Texas it's nonpartisan. My first elected officers, I spent 11 years in local office, school board 5 years, and then mayor in 3 terms. But you can do it while you can be a student and run. And seriously, there's some good ones who around. You look around the state and you'll find some who have. You can run for school board. There's community college board. There's city governments, that's nonpartisan. What state rep races, and Austin is going to be going to single-member districts when it's high time that Austin got single-member districts because make it affordable for where you don't have to run citywide. But you can do that and other things too. And Obama lost his first congressional race. And it doesn't matter, you may win or lose, but if you lose, you can build on that and run the next time. As long as you're true to yourself, you can get up and run again the next day. And you don't have to. You don't have to. That you can also get appointed to. And I'd go look over city stuff right now. And you, even as a student, while you're a student, there could probably be something you'd be very qualified to serve on a city board or commission, and get to know some of the council members. Go see them. Particularly go see the women on there. By the way, the great progressive city of Austin, Texas. I am not only the first woman mayor of Austin, I'm still the only woman mayor. Still the only mayor that got elected for 3 terms, too. I didn't run the 4th time. I had to make some money for boys through school. But anyway. And that's not to reflect on any, not to say we don't have good men mayors, but we need women in so many more positions, and a good way to get involved is starting on some committee work, either for the state, for the city. You've got a collective brain trust right here that city and state and federal consultant dollars could not afford and could not buy. So get out there and get involved, and you may do it on an issue. The med school issue was a good one to get involved in this last year. There's going to be affordable housing is coming up. There's going to be a bond election on affordable housing here, and we so need that to pass in this city. And it's going to be tough right now to pass affordable housing bonds. But but get involved and get to know those people there and ask people to help you. Listen, I didn't get where I am without a lot of help from women and men. And so don't be afraid to ask anybody to help you, and I'd be delighted to point you in directions. And a lot of it is just connecting. And you're building a great network here, and you're Ignite Texas and everything. I love what everybody's doing. I mean, all this is going to make such a difference, and this new leadership is fantastic. Any one of you could go out and do anything you want to do. And don't wait for the engraved invitation, because it isn't going to come. Just do it. St. Mary's is great.
Yes, I love St. Mary's.
My dad loved St. Mary's Law School too.
Yes.
When the year he had to retire as dean, he kept teaching, but he went to Oxford and to St. Mary's. And he wanted to give the new dean a chance to. But St. Mary's is great.
Thank you. Like you, I also believe that it's through our failures and our triumphs in which we learn. What one failure stands out in your mind that you could pass on to us that we could learn from?
I've had lots of failures. Can we skip the personal ones? Can we skip the personal ones and just go on with the others?
Hold that moment, she's speechless.
I have so many failures, it's not hard to think of them. I would comment about somebody's campaigns, and I'll leave those out. I say, oh, that's the worst run campaign I've ever seen, except for a couple of my own. But it's when I haven't listened to my gut. It's when I haven't listened to my gut. And that doesn't necessarily mean the elections you won or you lost, but I can remember ones that I've lost and won. You've got to do what you know is right. Once you do it, and you'll think it's all over. I can remember, we had a real hot issue here in Austin. I was the swing vote when I was mayor, which is a great place to be. We had 7 people. I could, 3 and 3, and I could make the difference. And I get real offended when people try to label someone a liberal or a conservative, or because I think we're all Austinites. And it was on boat races. It was on boat races in Town Lake. And I had supported those boat races, and I don't know if I'm talking about the failure, but I made the wrong decision, I think, in supporting them in the first place. Correct that. And what happened is you had the Chamber of Commerce, and they had Aquafest, which is a very highfalutin social deal here in Austin, and everybody would dress up in their white uniforms. Okay, the boat races were taking place over in East Austin, and right around Fiesta Gardens. And I was just cheering, and I'm going to leave my police officer friend out of this loop. But anyhow, even the police were coming to me, telling me, and I was a great supporter of the police, telling me that it was just getting horrible. And what happened is they would fence off the neighborhood. And I told them, I said, hey, you need to work with the neighborhood. They putting up their fences, and they'd have up their tents, and they'd have, they'd go have their drinks or whatever. And they were doing these high-speed boat races 3 weekends. Those, I mean, they're talking high speed. I mean, these are dangerous. If it's right on shoreline, other places there have been some bad outcomes, but they were fencing it off and all. And I thought, we'd supported this as a council, let it happen. And finally, we had a big public hearing. I called them. I said, let's just have a big public hearing about this. And it's when one of the mamas stood up and talking about a gun had been pulled on her son. Gun, I can't. It's allegedly, but I wanted whoever was putting on. And so I had a long and hard talk with the chamber people before that public hearing, and And I'd said, look, something's got to give. This is even before I heard that mother's testimony in the public hearing. And they were asking to do this 7 weekends. It was like 7 or 8 weekends, not just 3, 7 or 8. And they were already just totally disrupting the neighborhood in those 3 weekends. And I'd said, hey, you ought to work the neighborhood, see if you can help put in playgrounds, do this, do that, involve them in the events, let them come. I mean, after all, you're invading their neighborhood, let them be there, not have to pay. Enjoy. And there was just it was just everybody was no give, no give. No. I said, you agree with it? No. I said, okay. And I was, with no warning to anybody around, I flipped my vote, and it was a 4-3 vote to kill the boat race on Hell Lake. And I said, listen, we'll be glad to have them out at City Park in West Austin. Mm-hmm. I said, they're a much safer place than it is over at Fiesta Gardens for the boat races. If you want to put an item on the agenda for consideration about doing the boat races in West Austin, just let me know. Of course, they never put it on the agenda. That was the end of the boat races. Man, I got rained on. Oh, I mean, you would not believe. I thought that was the end of my political career. I really did. I can remember the only other thing that I did that was worse. Well, I don't know. It was bad. We had a bond election, and George Christian comes into this one. But anyway, we did the right thing on doing that. And that police officer brought me a card to this that said, hang in there, when the whole city was raining on me, and they were. And, and they, it just, all I had to do was just listen to that one moment, and that was it. Yeah, that was it. I mean, that just exemplified the whole thing. And so the boat races went away forever, and soon thereafter, the guys in their white suits. But that's all right. There were good things that kept going for Aqua Festival, but that wasn't one of them. I can remember after one bond election, and the whole council had voted 7-0. I won't say which term it was, so you won't know who to get mad at. The whole council had voted 7-0 for these bonds. We needed some water and wastewater bonds very badly. If you fall behind in your infrastructure, you never catch up, because the cost of catch-up is prohibitive. And so 7-0, they voted for these. My name was McClellan then, Carole McClellan. But anyway, by the time it got to election day, they were McClellan's water and wastewater bonds. There was a big swoop in the city to just, and the night before, several nights before, and that's before you'd ever heard of kind of negative ads running on TV. If you are in office and you're supporting bonds like in the city, you can't advocate for them with any city dollars. Now, I could go out and talk for the bonds, but I'd be doing it on my own, and if I had political dollars, using my political dollars, but you couldn't use a penny to advocate for these bonds with city dollars. That's a violation of what the same thing happens on the state scene. But 3 days out from this election for the bonds, the opposition ran a TV ad, and it had this bulldozer in Barton Springs. And it said, if you vote for the water and wastewater bonds this Saturday, you can be voting to bulldoze Barton Springs. There was not a single water or wastewater line in the entire Barton Creek watershed on that bond election. But they ran that ad for 3 days. We couldn't answer it anyway. You couldn't raise the money, couldn't answer it anyway. And so by election day, there were McClellan's water and wastewater bonds, and I, by God, was out on the sound truck again trying to pass those bonds, but everybody had disappeared on my council because they knew they were going down. Okay, here's what I said that night, and I'm not going to tell you. This is when I didn't listen to myself. You get yourself in trouble when you don't listen to your gut. But I was kind of shell-shocked. I'd just been going round the clock with kids and trying to pass bonds and everything else. And when the bond election, it was a disastrous bond election. I mean, those bonds were down big. And of course, you got to be there in good times and bad times when you're in the public arena. And the time you're out there first is when it's the bad times. You see people who don't do that. No, you've got to be there. And they may not like to say, but they're going to respect you for being there. You got to be there in the tough times. So I was the first one out there at night. But as I was running into the electric building auditorium and all the TV cameras were set up, I saw a political consultant who I'll leave unnamed who said, Carole, you know why those bonds went down, don't you? And I was just, no, tell me why. That's where I made my mistake, Anyway, and so this particular, he told me, and this particular consultant said, Well, the voters were confused. And he said, because they were seeing this, TV spot with the bulldozer in Barton Springs, and then they were hearing you say, that, no, but they say the voters are confused. And when the voters are confused, they either vote no or they stay home. And it was a very light turnout, but those who were voting against it were out. So what do? Man, I step right out to the camera and say the voters are confused. Not the thing to say on a camera. Never. I don't use the word, you'll notice when I was comptroller, if anyone ever wrote confusion, anything outside I never use that word again. Well, of course, you can imagine the whole next year, I ran for re-elect the next year. Everyone running against me. The voters weren't confused. You're confused, Mayor McClellan. I heard that so I put that to rest after I won my third term as mayor. But I remember I went to breakfast with George Christian. George Christian was a great guy. He was press secretary at the LBJ. I don't know if you all know who George Christian is or was, but he was a great press secretary and a great guy. And I said, George, I'm through, I'm done. Oh, no, you're not. No. You just think something's fatal. But, you can make bad mistakes and do stuff. But it's not the end. We got past that. And, but don't ever say the voters confused. The voters, exactly. Oh, and that's what I did too. I put out, the next day, I talked about, I said, hey, I understand, I get the message clearly, By the way, we went back, I had to get reelected the next year, and then the next fall, so it was 2 years later, we went back and passed all those bonds overwhelmingly, but at 2 or 3 times the cost. Whenever you say something, just imagine, or whenever you tweet something, or, just imagine it standing by itself in the headlines of the newspaper. I used to tell my kids that. They said, twice tough as you, just whatever it is. Just, there's some people who've run for office, I try to tell that to anyway. But just remember, whatever you say, it's like the voters confused. It's going to be taken out of context, which that comment I made was certainly taken out of context. And just make sure it's something that'll stand alone, because that's what's going to happen to it. So don't ever tweet something or say something. I don't care how many times the press asks you a question. They used to play games with me when I was mayor, and comptroller too. They'd ask me the same question over and over again just to see me. If you have to answer it 59 times the same way, you can keep answering it the same way. They want to just wear you down till you say something inappropriate, but just don't say anything. They're going to know, not going to know someone was hammering you for 3 hours on something. They're going to take out of context anything you say. So make sure whatever you, particularly what you tweet or put in an email or anything else, that it can stand alone in the headline and not be something you don't want your mama to read.